Clyde's usual seat. Clyde just snuck in here for a minute. That's why I did. Yeah, that's why I'm just letting you know that Herbie might have done something over to your seat.
Herbie was pounding the desk on Clyde.
He did.
Pounding it, whereas Clyde just does it with his.
He was just in fact making a point.
Yes, I don't know what it was about.
He wasn't like thumping at the keyboard.
Like I don't know what he was emphatic about. It wasn't Game of Thrones.
I was about to say that would be the only thing, or how he ran into and did totally ignored that Paul Rudd and Chris Evans, two Avengers that he would of course supposed to know, that he just totally walked by him.
Why didn't I bring that up? Because he was such a geek about that. Let's tell everybody what happened there.
Yeah, so we are, by the way, we will talk sports, just a heads up. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and this was, of course, the Thursday night game last week. Well, we're walking into the stadium, and they've got these two guys, just average Joe-looking guys. I mean, you wouldn't know any better if you, obviously, if you follow Hollywood, you probably should know better, but we're just, trying to get out of the cold and into the stadium. We're get us. And with that, we're standing by the gate, and we just walk right in. And as we just walk right by Chris Evans, who is better known as Captain America, and Paul Rudd, who is better known for other things than Ant-Man, but he is Ant-Man. And he is in the Avengers, so they're filming the Avengers, something like that in Atlanta. And Josh, I think he goes up to Paul Rudd and he says, "Man, you one time I was with my sister somewhere," and I was like, I would never go up to Paul Rudd. I said, "Do you remember that one time I think you met me?"
I can remember that.
Right. And then everyone just ignores Chris Evans, and then we just walk by, and I turn and look. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's who that is." And Herbie, of course, he's kind of a geek on some of these things.
Kind of.
Very much a geek with some of these things, and the fact that he just totally blew by him. Wouldn't it? We got into the room, and he just totally had no idea what was going on. And then we saw him. Yes, he was.
I was worried that he was going to be able to cover the game. He was in such awe of these two superhero actors that, frankly, Paul Rudd, I've never heard of Chris Evans, and you all were giving me grief about it because I'm such a loser as far as
you should just do IMDb, and he's been in many, many things in life, but most famously, he is Captain America.
Yeah, I found that out. But it was, first of all, not a lot of star power there. I mean, no one even knew they were around. They were just standing outside the gate of the stadium. They looked like just two dudes, two regular fans trying to get in. They weren't dressed up or anything, and Hollywood dudes wearing sunglasses at night or something, trying to look like you're Hollywood.
I mean, that's only Corey Hart in a song where he wears sunglasses at night, dude. Get with the.
P. Diddy does. I think. Does Jay-Z ever not wear sunglasses?
Maybe he's got a vision.
I mean,
problem.
does he take shower with the sunglasses on? I think
maybe so.
That's what I was expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but I certainly wasn't expecting these two Hollywood stars to be standing there trying to bribe their way in, or
They look like they were trying to
jump their way in. We just breezed right by them.
We're like, "Here's our passes," and they just let us walk through.
With the security.
Who are these punks? Get out.
Yeah, work to do.
Get these punks out here. But yeah, it was a funny story. But yeah, you did miss an opportunity to do that yesterday. That's on you, Jeff. I know you were managing the show, trying to get them both in line, get whatever else was going on in line. You had to deal with Fletcher Maxwell for the first time on our show. I can't believe you allowed him on the show.
This was funny. You would believe it. You would have loved it. So Fletcher, we get one question in about the Pelicans game.
Oh no.
Sunday night, because I saw him at the Pelicans game. That's when I invited him to come on. I knew he'd have some thoughts, as always. And Fletcher's first answer, I'm not exaggerating, I think it went 2 minutes long. He was rambling so much, and his call dropped in the middle of it, or at the end of it. And literally, I chimed in that the FCC must have weighed in for seized control of Fletcher's long-winded answer because he dropped the call. And I still think he might still be rambling at his mid-city house right now.
I guarantee you he's rambling because the Pelicans lost 130 to 123.
Yes.
Even though they shut the lights out in Houston and still lost. Look, they were without Anthony Davis. So you almost expected a loss at Toyota Center in Houston, but the tone after after the game, I think the Pelicans, they felt upbeat given how good Houston is, B, how well they played. That's the game you play with Houston. I mean, you're going to be playing an up-tempo, high-scoring. Defense is going to be at a minimum. But the Pelicans were without Anthony Davis, and what, did they only have 8 men really available to play?
Right.
So an exhausting game. They certainly need the break, but still, look, you lose to one of the best teams in the NBA. You lose on the road. I'm not going to give them grief. Now, if we would have been on the show, say, Saturday after the Pelicans lost to the Kings, we could have been nuking them. But look, they bounced back and beat the Sixers. Then they go on the road and lose to the Rockets. So they're basically back at square one, essentially, where they've been all year.
They're a real puzzling team. I mean, they were down to the Sixers going in the fourth quarter and turned it on in the fourth quarter. But that was a Sixers team without Joel Embiid, without Robert Covington, T.J. McConnell. They were undermanned. And the Pelicans just kind of cruise control against these lesser teams, and sometimes it works. It worked against the Sixers. It did not work against the Kings, and they cannot afford that. They're not the Golden State Warriors, for goodness sakes. They can't afford to take their foot off the accelerator, and I think that's what's frustrating Alvin Gentry a little bit. But I would say this, the guy that is just I'm marveling at right now is Rajon Rondo. The numbers he's putting up assist-wise, he had 18 assists the other night. I think this is now a string of 6 straight games, I think, or 4 or 5 of the last 6 with at least double-digit assists. They are so much better, Larry, with him in control of the offense, running the offense through him. He's so smart and crafty. And I got to admit, when they signed him, I thought, well, this is another kind of end-of-the-road career move. You know, he's just latching on. He's been with about 4 teams. He's a difference maker out there for them, at least on this team. He fits really well, and I have to give Dell Demps credit for pulling it off and bringing him in because he's exactly the kind of guy they need, and I think he and Holiday are starting to work really well together. And if they keep getting production out of Holiday and Etuan Moore, this team's got a shot.
Yeah, I've got to get off Drew Holiday's back now because he's played consistently well since Rajon Rondo got in the lineup, and you can tell he's feeling more comfortable as far as playing. But I still don't want to. Yes, I want to sound upbeat because I didn't expect them to win. Look, they had a shot to win, and I let me tell you this. I love what Rajon Rondo told our own Will Guillory after the game. Will was in Houston covering the game. And the final quote in his story he posted this morning, because like I said, you listen to the sound bites, and you're gonna hear from Etuan Moore and Drew Holiday in the next segment. We'll play their thoughts in the game last night, but I love what Rajon Rondo said. It's pretty short quote. Here it is. We're pros. We want to go out there and compete, but bleep competing, I thought we should have won. I'd rather hear that than, we shot the ball well, this, that, and the other. I want to hear blunt. I don't care if we think we're playing well, but we're still losing.
Right.
I'd rather hear that every night.
Totally agree. It's so refreshing to hear that because I think we've had a lot of this, it's okay to come close. And look, last night was an admirable effort. I mean, Houston is one of the best teams. Right now they have the best record in the league. They are very difficult to beat anywhere, much less in Houston, much less without your star, Anthony Davis. And I will say this, the Pelicans, they play up or down to the level of their competition. It's a very dangerous thing for this team. If they played as well as they did last night and with as much energy and effort against Sacramento as they did last night, they wouldn't have lost to Sacramento. So that's something that Alvin Gentry's got to get a handle on because this team isn't good enough, and they're gonna look back on some of these games they dropped and have regrets that they didn't get a higher seeding and may end up getting stuck opposite Golden State. The big three, let's face it, Larry, the big three are Houston, San Antonio when they get Kawhi Leonard back, and Golden State. Nobody wants to be opposite those three in the Western Conference.
And even without Kawhi Leonard, look, the Spurs are 19-8. So
that's what I mean.
When they get back, they're a real dangerous team.
They're not going to be an easy out.
And you look at the games they've lost, and I feel like that's why my attitude has been pretty consistent with this team. I think they're doing about what I thought they would be doing. Is it 500? Yes, but they're outside of the Kings game. That could be a game where down the line because you can't afford slip-ups. If they lose another one or two of those are the ones where they're going to be kicking themselves. And if they're a game or two behind a team and they've got to, they're at 8 instead of 6 or 8 instead of 5, I mean, they'd be kicking themselves. But the games that they've won, I just figured they'd win. The games that they lost outside of the Kings game, I would assume it would be a challenge, and kind of some of these would be coin flip games. And they haven't won a lot of these, say, coin flip games. They got to start winning more of those.
Yeah, I agree. It's like they've done exactly what we expected. I think they beat the Spurs and the Cavs at home. You kind of think those are games they could be able to win. But dropping that Kings game, that was the first game I can think of that they dropped that was just egregious. Now, I know they got blown out in Denver, but that can happen in the NBA. Denver's a good team, and they were playing well at the time. That didn't upset me as much as seeing them lose a home game to Sacramento, for goodness sakes.
Well, I think all you had to see was Alvin Gentry's reaction after the game, and he was bent.
Yeah.
He knew that they blew it.
And he was losing it a little bit against the Sixers, and he ended up, I talked to Will Guillory during the game. It looked to me like he was sending a message to AD and to Cousins. He left them out together for a long time, and they were getting crushed on the glass when both of them were in there. And I think he was sending a message, and I think it worked because they opened the fourth quarter with both of them back in the lineup, and they just completely dominated Philly. I think they scored 44 in the fourth quarter, which is a huge amount, and just put them away. But I think it's troubling that you have to send the message to these guys. But look, it's an 82-game season too.
Absolutely, yeah. They're 28 games in, and you can hit a little bit of a wall. And I'm not saying that they have, but you just look at the pattern. They've won. They're 3-6 in their last 9 games, and it was loss, win, loss. So there's no consistency there, and I think for the Pelicans to legitimately feel like they can do something later on down the line, obviously they've got to gain some consistency, or they're just going to be kind of floating around, and we're going to be wondering, what do they do come trade deadline? Because that's the point. That's always going to be the point where, all right, where is this team right now? And they got to make some really hard decisions.
They're also 7-7 at home and 7-7 on the road. So I mean, there's just nothing standing out. They got to play better at home. I mean,
right.
You can't be 7-7 at home. I mean, one of the reasons Utah's still in this thing, they're 11-5 at home this year, 2-9 on the road. So it's encouraging that the Pelicans have won 7 road games, but they got to make the Smoothie King Center more of a home court advantage, and they haven't been able to do that so far.
Yeah, I would agree. Why don't we take a break right here on the show? We'll talk a little bit more Pelicans in the next segment. You'll hear from Etuan Moore, who had a monster game last night. You'll hear from Drew Holiday, who had a monster game last night in a loss to the Rockets. Then 10:30, we're going to have Sean Fazan from Fox 8. Jeff, I get to retell a story that I don't know if it actually made air. Maybe video was covering this, what happened with Sean and I during our pregame Falcons-Saints interview. But it was one of the more bizarre things I've ever had to deal with during live TV. So we'll talk about that when Sean Fazan comes on. And then around 11:30, an old, longtime friend covering the NFL. I haven't talked with in a while, but I used to work with him at CBSSports.com. He's still there, covers the NFL. Will Brinson, we'll talk with him around 11:30, and we'll talk Saints, NFC. Obviously, the huge news yesterday, confirmed and out for the year, is Carson Wentz. What does that do for Philadelphia, and does that open some things up still for the Saints and for some other teams? So we'll talk about that throughout much of the show. And your phone calls, 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved in the conversation here on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. We're Dunc and Holder. I mean, audio was working though on YouTube?
Sports 1280.
Yeah, it was working. It was like choppy.
Slipped us some Pelicans tickets.
But it was the same thing. All of a sudden, headsets were cutting
Well,
out.
that's because you fiddle with it sometimes.
I know, that's what I mean, but it was throwing off those guys big time.
Yeah.
And we don't even care.
I'm used to we're used to playing through it.
Right, like my headset's got a
Except
little
during morning raw, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, you just gotta
Pelicans
fiddle with
tickets
it.
on Sports 1280 and catch the games on News Talk 99.5 WRNO.
If you need a payday loan fast, try LendUp.com. Apply in minutes on your phone or computer, and you could have cash in your account fast. LendUp.com, the better payday loan. LendUp.com, subject to availability in your state. LendUp is a licensed credit services organization, not a direct lender, in Ohio and Texas.
Okay, pumpkin.
Yeah, I called. I texted Bregman's dad yesterday because I'd interviewed him before.
Yeah.
I said, hey, I went through the Astros. I went through his agent. I just need him for like one or two comments. I know he'd want to be a part of the story. He's like, here's a cell phone. Just give him a call. Like,
Amazon Music Unlimited.
Called him yesterday. And he was great.
Sign up today and receive
Didn't even know. He's like, no one's even reached out to me.
Amazon.com.
He could be lying.
Music Unlimited. Automatically renews.
No,
Cancel
'cause he
anytime.
would go on Moscona's show all the
dance
time.
for all to see. Because I am a
No, he's
mover
from all I've ever
and a
known.
shaker.
He's just like
I'm
this
Tamara,
great guy.
and
Yeah,
I've been
I've
living
dealt with him a
MS
couple times. He was
since
great.
Stay off
2004.
Twitter.
Join the movement.
Yeah.
NationalMSSociety.org.
He had Twitter forever, too. Nothing like.
Yeah, I saw that. He went off Twitter for a while.
Yeah, he didn't like doing
Taylor
anything.
Swift's run
like,
atop the
totally
Billboard
terrible.
200 album
Bad
sales
enough
chart
where it's
over
like,
after her
just-
reputation tumbled to number 3.
That's awesome.
Swift's hold on number 1 was loosened by
That
U2's
just means we
Songs
can
of
get him on the
Experience,
show.
which debuted
Honestly,
at number 1,
if you
earning
wanted
the
to.
Irish Rockers their
I
8th
know.
number 1 album.
He'd do it.
Katy Perry and Demi Lovato among a number of
What's funny
musicians
is
lending their support to a
I
bullied
was looking at-
Tennessee
I don't know what
student.
that is.
A video of Keaton Jones'
some guy.
emotional plea to his bullies has gone viral,
I
leading
was,
Perry to tweet, "This broke my heart," while Demi
went back and
Lovato
got each of their
tweeting, "Keaton,
Twitter
baby,
accounts.
just know you're not
Yeah.
alone."
1 minute.
All
Others
three
who showed their
players.
support include
They
Kevin
picked out
Jonas, Snoop
big
Dogg, and
games
Enrique
stuff during their careers,
Iglesias.
like, see if they commented on them. So I could- And like
Justin Bieber
Bregman
vowing
all
to
the
help
time
those
talking about
affected by
Fournette
the
and
Southern
Simmons.
California
Fournette talking about
wildfires
Simmons,
in
like,
whatever way he
Simmons
can.
never
anything.
says
In a
anything
video,
about
the
it.
Sorry singer said he
He
was going to
wasn't
meet with
invested
people to
in
get
LSU.
going on a
No,
solution,
those two other
including
guys
organizing
were.
fundraisers or
amazing.
Yeah,
whatever
those
we
two
can
guys
do.
were invested.
A documentary about Prince's life is coming. The project was
Because they
supported
had
by
to stay
Spotify's global
for
head of creative
specific
services,
period.
Troy
Like,
Carter, who serves
not
as
your
an
boy.
advisor to the late pop singer's estate. The Boss, Metallica, and Guns N' Roses among the highest-paid musicians of the year. Forbes magazine out with the list, saying it was compiled based on pre-tax earnings.
10 seconds.
With $130 million, followed by Beyonce, Drake, The Weeknd, and Coldplay. That's entertainment. Jennifer Bolsoni, NBC News Radio.
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Pelicans, valiant effort, but go down to the Houston Rockets 130 to 123. They will take the court again tomorrow night against Milwaukee. And I still don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. I'm never going to know how to pronounce his name.
Giannis.
Yeah, that guy. What's his name? I don't even know. All I know is I see him on highlights skying like he's, I don't know, 7'8", and he could just like fly through the gym, dunk, score. One of the premier players in the NBA, and I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I think it's Antetokounmpo.
Yeah, I'm not even
Antetokounmpo.
good. I'm not going to try.
It's not easy. I do remember last year at the All-Star game, he was the guy of all the players in the game that just blew me away with his athletic ability. Giannis did. I mean, he's like this gazelle running the court. He runs the court like a 6'3" guy, but he's like this long, like incredible length to him, and he can get from one end to the other very quickly. Yeah, he's a special talent and one of the future stars of the league.
Yeah, so the Pelicans will have to deal with him tomorrow night in the Smoothie King Center. I'm curious to see if Anthony Davis is a go. He did not play last night. And, Jeff, you just look at the big totals by the Pelicans, and we talked about it in the last segment. Look, Drew Holiday had 37. Etuan Moore had 36. Etuan Moore was 15 of 20 from the field and 6 of 8 from 3. Drew Holiday was 16 of 21 from the field, 4 of 7 from 3. Those are monster numbers in a loss. It's wild to see that, but it happened. But yeah, let's hear from let's see who we hear from first. Let's hear from Etuan Moore, because look, he's someone who you didn't anticipate would be in the starting lineup, and I feel like the more he's played, the better he's been playing. And the Pelicans obviously need that from time to time. So let's hear what Etuan Moore had to say about how he's playing this following last night's loss to the Rockets.
Just being aggressive. I mean, make it easier playing off those guys, playing with Drew and Rondo, like the pass, and playing off Cousins. I mean, he give me a lot of open shots too. So, just being aggressive and trying to help our team win.
And knowing last year you were pretty much battling through that tournament the whole time, kind of be playing so well right now. How important is that for you?
Oh, it's big. Definitely feel good to play injury-free. Feel a lot better. Just free, just to go out there and play and don't worry about hurting. So you feel good.
What do you think about just the way as a team you guys are playing so well offensively, and obviously like you had 30-something points, Drew had 30-something points. It just seems like this is the highest level of offense you guys have played in the 2 years that you've been here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We got a lot of guys that can do a lot of things, a lot of talent. Once we get it together a little bit more on the defensive end, I think it'll be hard to beat.
What do you feel like y'all just kind of ran out of gas at the end, just all the scoring early and then just a short bench?
I mean, yeah, we know we were just down guys, so we just putting it out there trying to play hard, but it did get a little tough, in the fourth quarter for us. The game got real fast, but we just keep working and hopefully we can pull those kind of games off in the future.
Well, some of those guys are going to need a day to just do nothing because, let's see, Etuan Moore played 42 minutes, Rajon Rondo 42 minutes, Drew Holiday 41 minutes, Darius Miller played 39 minutes, and they only had 3 players that played off the bench, so they were certainly down some bodies there, and there's no wonder they ran out of gas. Like, they got outscored in the fourth quarter 34-20, and that was obviously the difference maker in the game.
It almost seemed inevitable that was going to happen. As I was watching the game, I was talking to Brett Martell from the Associated Press, and both of us were saying they're playing the Rockets game, but they don't have the players to play the Rockets game. They don't have the numbers, and eventually the Rockets are just going to wear them down. That's exactly what happened. But I guess if you're Alvin Gentry, you just got to go with it and see if it works out. I mean, they were hitting such a high percentage, and what was amazing, Larry, was the night before against Philly, they had a huge shooting night. I mean, I remember that. I think they were like, if I recall correctly, 15 of 22 or something like that, something crazy in that game from three-point range, over 500 shooting, and they started out in this game even hotter. So back-to-back. At one point, I remember they had made 32 of their last 52 threes. That's insane.
That is.
You're not going to keep that up.
Yeah.
But that's the way the Rockets play, too. And the Rockets turned it up, Harden and Chris Paul. And I don't know who was guarding Clint Capella, but
it looks like no one.
He was just getting free in the lane, wide open for dunks. I mean, it was just – that was bad defense there.
Clint Capella went 13 of 14 from the field.
That's what I'm saying. Every play was a dunk. I don't know how many of them were dunks, but it seemed like no one was defending him. I don't know if that's because of the floor spacing the Rockets have, but somebody was leaving him open. Many times they were getting it on the pick and roll with Harden, who they just didn't defend it very well, and Harden was throwing little alley-oops. I mean, how many assists did Harden have?
Harden had 17 assists.
Yeah, many of them to Capella.
And Capella, he was their leading scorer with 28 points. Chris Paul had 20 points. Harden went 26 and 17. He also had 6 steals. And then, Eric Gordon off the bench, 27 points.
But here's the thing, Larry. You can live with Harden and Paul getting theirs. You can't give up 27 to Clint Capella.
Or, 28 to Capella. You can't give up 27 to Eric Gordon either. You can't let that happen.
But, I mean, he's a scorer. Capella's a rebounder and defender.
Right. Well,
he's not a guy that should be getting in the 20s.
Well, Drew Holiday has been on a roll, like you said, and I've got to back off on him because I think he's playing well enough for me to say, all right, let's give you a break.
Oh, nice.
You get a little break.
So magnanimous, so generous of you to back off.
Hey, I am a generous guy.
He struggled early, but he is turning it on. I think a lot of it has to do with Rondo being in the lineup with him.
I would agree. Let's hear what Drew Holiday had to say after last night's loss in Houston.
Just been clicking. We obviously knew that guys were down tonight, and again, the other guys had to step up. So we had to step up to the challenge. We know that they're top in the West and how good they are and what they like to do. I think we did a pretty good job of trying to execute the game plan.
And knowing that it's second night of a back-to-back, so many guys out, I mean, how big is it for the team's confidence to kind of trade punches with top teams in the West the way you did tonight?
Yeah, I know we're all tired, and that's not really an excuse, but I think just to keep our composure and fight really brings us as a team closer together.
Why don't we take a break right here on the show, and when we get back, let's talk with Sean Fazan from WVUE TV's Fox 8, of course, here in New Orleans, and been on our show plenty of times. We'll talk with him about the Saints. Look, they're gearing up to take on the Jets on Sunday. We'll also hear from Will Brinson from CBSSports.com in the 11 o'clock hour, around 11:30. So, and we will take your phone calls. 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved here. But Sean Fazan coming up next on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. We're Dunc and Holder.
Orchard Tuesday.
That's right, yeah.
Your forecast on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Best trade I ever made.
Brought to you by McDonald's. From the Fox 8 Weather Center,
third or fourth time I've had that happen.
Today,
I made a trade for a superstar, and they ended up in the American League.
50s. Now tonight, could see a light freeze or frost on the North Shore of 32, 39 south, and tomorrow Wednesday,
I remember one time getting into it
a high of 59.
Paul Rube,
gradually warming up to
in the league
66 on Thursday. Then
Keith O'Brien, they
yeah,
were
I remember Paul. I don't think.
Yeah, they were teammates. I remember them. And they changed the rule. That's what killed me about it. Like,
download the McDonald's app and get a
mid-season.
free large soft drink with any purchase.
Now,
for
if a
free
guy
week.
gets
And right
traded,
now,
you
get
get
any
to keep his
size soft
stats for
drink
the
or
year.
sweet tea
Right.
for just $1
Well, back
anytime at
then,
McDonald's.
if he gets
Limited
traded, he's
time.
over.
Participation
You just lost him. I had like
See
3 or 4 guys,
McDonald's.com for
and then we had
details.
that stupid
McDonald's,
waiver system where I couldn't
loving it.
supplant my roster.
World Comic-Con,
So I was
January
complaining
5th
about
through 7th at
that,
Ernest
and
and
I'm
Moriarty
never forget one of those guys
Convention
chiming in
Center.
saying,
Stars, including Marvel
you got to know
Comics,
that
Stan Lee, David Tennant,
before the season.
Sean.
You know, you got to know before the season you can't acquire a guy that might be on the trade block. And I go, yeah, so you know he's going to get traded to the American League.
iHeartRadio
Give me a
has
break.
partnered with Red
Exactly. You
and
know,
Red
give me a break, you
Aid.
asshole.
Whether you
Oh,
love the
excuse me.
color
You son of a bitch!
or a powerful force in the fight.
What's the damn language?
It was just
Amazon.com.
ridiculous, though, man.
It's
Just,
for YouTube, people.
YouTube hearing about Jeffrey's fantasy baseball.
and then, of course, they changed the rule like 2 years later probably when Jim Derry lost a guy in the league. That's how it works.
See, Derry scams the system.
Derry
basically
baseball. He changes the rules to suit his.
The Patriots'
still owes
8-game
me
winning
money.
streak is ended as Tom Brady gets picked twice.
Season's
The
only
Patriots
end
lose
2.5 months
27-20
ago.
to the Dolphins.
Still
on
owes
Monday
me. Yeah,
Night
the
Football
only part of the
in
money
Miami.
I've got is the
Brady did
money
set
that
the
you
single
gave.
season record for most
That's
passing yards by a
unbelievable.
quarterback.
Well, I mean, what are we doing with the banquet?
Last night, Miami's Jay Cutler
I
had
don't
3
know. We do that-
touchdowns in the win. Meanwhile, NFL
I thought we always did that, like,
spending Hall of Famer
postseason
Marshall
banquet.
Falk and 2 others after a lawsuit by a former
I always feel
wardrobe
like it
stylist
it
claiming
doesn't happen
sexual
until, like,
harassment.
after
2/3
football
of the Ball
season.
brothers are headed to Europe. ESPN reports LiAngelo and LaMelo Ball.
All right, 30 seconds.
Send the Ball brothers to another planet.
Siberia.
Yeah.
BC Vitautas. And as the Major League Baseball
Where they going? Latvia, Yugoslavia,
Lithuania.
new out
Lithuania. Same smell.
Stanton Monday.
That's what I've
The
always wanted.
Ruskies.
That's what I dreamed of.
The slugger acquired from the Marlins hit 59 home runs last season. Meanwhile, the Yankees
I bet they probably believe it if we said we had a league on Mars.
extension. That's sports.
Did you see my tweet about the alien spacecraft coming our way?
No.
No.
Yeah.
Learn what our insiders know about your home teams. Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Welcome back. Duncan Holder here, live at NOLA.com, Times-Picayune Studios. Larry Holder, Jeff Duncan here with you. And now, pleased to be joined by my Sunday Saints pregame partner in debauchery, Sean Fazan, and also my bestie when it comes to Vanderpump Rules talk and going to Sir restaurants. You know, anything Bravo, Sean and I are way involved in. Jeff is looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about?
I'll just take a break at this moment in the program.
But Sean and I, we could just take this whole conversation over and just talk about what happened with Jax Taylor last night. Bad news for him. Poor guy. Poor fella.
Yeah, man, it's been a tough couple days for him. But yeah, man, great trip to the West Coast. I get more questions about that picture we took outside of Sir than anything else, than anything I've ever tweeted or shown throughout this football season. That trip to Sir got a lot of curious minds asking me questions.
I agree. Even in the office here, of course, our wives were giddy that we went there, and so yeah, we experienced it. And now we know more characters in the show, so that's good. But I do want to bring up this one wacky element that we had to deal with on Thursday night in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. How the Falcons cheerleader walked right in front of the camera during when we were live. I have no idea. Do you know if that actually made it to air or was video covering that? Because I made an awkward stop and I leaned in the cheerleader and I said, "Hello, Falcons cheerleader," moving on, and I just like flowed with it. But I acknowledged that she existed and jumped right between us two and the camera.
Yeah, you know, I went back and checked. I didn't see it unless someone else saw it. But I tell you what did. I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you were around there at that point, but I believe it was Cam Jordan's agent walked right through our shot, despite us trying to stop him as it got closer and closer to kickoff. He got on the air, but that the Falcons cheerleader was kind of short, so she was able to kind of scoot underneath the camera. So I don't think much of her was seen during our interview, but you were able to at least acknowledge the what was a pretty interesting scenario. There was so many people around there. I don't know. I mean, I know it's always like the case pregame, but I think what happened was that show in particular, we were closer to kickoff than we normally would be, so it got crazy around us during the pregame kickoff area against the Falcons.
Yeah, you know, Sean, that pregame, you're right. There's always a lot of people on the sidelines, but that one in particular, I mean, I was walking around and there was all these. Michael Vick was down there, and I think Deion Sanders. There was all these ex-Falcons running around, and that stadium kind of lends itself to people being unaware, gawking up at that halo board and all the things that are up in the stands. It causes you to kind of look up as opposed to looking where you're going. I could see that easily happening.
Well, unaware is a perfect way to describe my experience in that stadium. When we got to the stadium, the young lady at the front was unaware of where the media entrance was. When we got down to the field, the stadium workers were unaware of where the post-game interview area was. When I was trying to walk to the press box, the other workers were unaware of where the press box was. It was it was an interesting experience from a logistical standpoint inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Beautiful stadium, just mix in a sign or something so we can all kind of know where we're going pre- and post-game.
All right, that's Sean Fazan, WVUE TV, Fox 8, joining us right here on Dunc and Holder. We'll lean off of our own selfish conversation that we could have at any point outside
of what we talk about among ourselves all the time.
Outside of live radio. Sean, you saw, I'm assuming you saw our own Josh Katzenstein's report, had a chance to catch up with Alvin Kamara briefly yesterday, and he says he feels like he'll be ready to go on Sunday. If he's not ready to go, how much does that impact the Saints against the Jets? I'm not saying against the rest of the NFL, but maybe against the Jets, who seem to be reeling at this point in the season.
You probably can survive the Jets because in this scenario, you would have a chance to game plan without Kamara should he not be able to go. I think that's what caught him off guard Thursday, was that they had it. I'm sure he was a huge part of the game plan, and obviously after the first drive, he's out and you got to adjust quickly. You probably can survive the Jets. You probably won't be able to survive the Falcons Christmas Eve, and you won't do much in the playoffs should he have to miss even extended time, which I highly doubt he will, without Alvin Kamara. He is basically become their explosive player, and you see how not explosive they are when he's out of the game. You have the running threat of Mark Ingram, and obviously you have Michael Thomas, but they don't have quite the explosiveness on the edge that they had a year ago when they had Brandon Cooks and Willie Snead was playing like Willie Snead. Ted Ginn has been okay at those shallow crosses, but the deep ball hasn't been there as much. And then you saw that last play of the game. I mean, the last offensive play of the game. I mean, look, they don't have a tight end that can really run that seam route and make that catch. That's the Jimmy Graham route, and they weren't able to do it. So Alvin Kamara has become such a focal point because of his dual threat ability to run and catch, and also lightning in a bottle of making big plays on seemingly simple plays. So I think they would survive the Jets game because I think you could game plan and you could probably manifest a game plan that would work this weekend. But if they want to have any hope of going further in the playoffs, they got to have Kamara back.
Sean, other than injuries, because that's kind of an obvious answer, other than injuries, what concerns you the most about this team going down the stretch and potentially into the playoffs?
Yeah, look, I think I alluded to it earlier, but when you play against great secondaries, other than Michael Thomas, I'm not sure that the Saints wide receiver core and tight ends match up as well with some of the more athletic and better secondaries in the NFL right now, especially the ones that are going to be in the playoffs. And I think that's a real concern, especially if you wouldn't have a guy like Alvin Kamara. Now, if you have Kamara, you obviously have that chess piece, that joker role where he's a mismatch against anybody. But as the season's going on and you see the emergence of the ground game and Kamara, I think a little bit of that was out of, obviously they're playing well, but also necessity. And obviously, look, you got to make sure you're consistent in the pass rush. And obviously, Cam Jordan is doing his thing, but Alex Okafor's injury is starting to really show up a little bit these last couple of weeks, and that's a worry for me as well, just because we know how important that is in the playoffs. So those are the two areas that kind of concern me as you get closer and closer here to the postseason. I think it's something they can overcome, but I think that's two issues where you can look at and say, okay, you're going to have to get that figured out.
Sean Fazan, WVUE TV, Fox 8, joining us right here on Dunc and Holder. Sean, you look at the teams that the Saints have lost to, and I feel like if you're a Saints fan and people are looking at this Jets game, and I've already seen on Twitter, because I put out there, oh, look, Bryce Petty's going to be starting, and everyone's screaming from the hilltops, panic game or a trap game, the old cliche. But I just feel like this team, they don't lose to bad teams. Like, Atlanta's still a good team, and everyone they all lost to are good teams. Maybe I'm jumping on board and thinking, hey, the Saints aren't susceptible to a bad loss, but I do think that way. What do you think about this team, and do you think they're susceptible to maybe a stinker?
I kind of agree with you there, because I think, week to week, especially during an 8-game win streak, I think we must have brought up the term trap game quite a few times when they played Chicago, when they played Green Bay, when they played a couple of other teams. That word trap, that phrase trap game was brought up quite a bit. And I think had they beaten the Falcons Thursday, maybe you could consider this being a trap game against the Jets. But by no means should this be a trap game now, because there's nothing to overlook. You have to win to keep pace, because a loss, you could theoretically, if certain things happen, you could be all the way down to the 6th seed with a loss. So this is have to win from here on out just to maintain your pace, your place in the NFC. So I don't think this is a trap game at all. Now, if they were to lose, it'd be because they played bad. But I think you're right, because you look at the teams they've lost to: Vikings, playoff team; Patriots, playoff team; Falcons, playoff team. So you're talking about teams that Rams, playoff team. So they've lost to quality competition, but the teams they were supposed to beat, they've beaten. And I think they're just coming off a very tough loss against their bitter rival. I think they'll be ready for this one.
Hey, Sean. As it's never too early to talk about the draft, and we all love to talk about the draft. So I want to get your thoughts. You've alluded to this earlier, that the Saints need maybe a tight end to run the seam, maybe another receiver. What do you think if you're in control of the Saints draft next year, knowing what you know now with the current roster, we don't know about free agency, what direction do you go in next year?
Those are the two right there. I think this is a draft Sean Payton's going to like, because I think it's a draft where they need some offensive skill position players. You need a wide receiver, especially if, you don't. Willie Snead's a restricted free agent, if I'm not mistaken, coming after this year. What do you do with him? I think you'd use another receiver. Look, the tight end, from an athletic standpoint, the athleticism is just not there. So I think you'd need a big pass-catching tight end. Obviously, we know what Jimmy Graham did when he was here. Defensively, I think you can never have enough pass rushers, and maybe even a corner, depending on what happens in free agency. So those would be the areas I would target now. And look, I am of the opinion as well, and this may not be the most popular thing, but I think given the age of Drew Brees and given the quarterback class, I think it would be harder for the Saints to bypass this quarterback class as well. So I could see them, if the grade was high enough, them pulling the trigger on a quarterback as well.
Sean, you're forgetting about Taysom Hill, the next Steve Young on the roster right now.
Right, you saw that. He's the future, right? Running down special teams kickoff. He's the future.
My favorite thing, Larry and I laughed about this on the show, Sean Payton backtracking on it, crawfishing, trying to temper the enthusiasm, when we all know he was the one that started the enthusiasm.
Well, he backed away from that so fast. The second I saw the quote, I said, oh, no, everyone's alluding to the Troy Aikman soundbite in the game, because I got 3 or 4 texts right when it happened. And sure enough, the question came, and Sean Payton wanted no part of that question. He backed away so fast. Look, I think Taysom Hill is a good story, but absolutely not. Is he the dead set future at the most important position on the team? No way.
I would agree. Sean Fazan, WVUE TV, Fox 8, joining us right here on Dunc and Holder. Sean, you look at this NFC South, and how do you forecast it? Because, look, even though the Saints They're still technically the division leader. They're still tied with the Panthers, and Atlanta's still a game back, and you got to play Atlanta. Just how do you forecast this thing going forward? I'm not even ready to say, oh, this is hook, line, and sinker for the Saints, because you just don't know. The NFL has been such a crazy world so far this year.
It really has, and I think the NFC South, despite the slow start, has become the division we thought it would be, with just three very good teams, and we all thought Tampa would be better than what they are, and you just never know. I mean, I think that season finale will be, an interesting game. I think they can obviously win. I do know that the schedule is favorable for the Saints. We talk about the Jets, and then a Christmas Eve game against Atlanta at home. I think there'll be some revenge on the mind there, and then of course to close out the season, New Year's Eve in Tampa. So I do think the schedule works in their favor. And I think it's going to be right down to the wire. But I like the Saints' chances because they don't need help from anyone else. If they take care of their own business, they'll win the NFC South. So I like where they stand. Certainly, you got to bring it every week because it's the NFL. But I like their current position despite the loss. I think what kind of stinks is that you're no longer probably in that spot for the 1 or 2 seed anymore, just because of the distance between the 1 and 2 seed and the tiebreakers. But at the very least, I think you're in position to win the NFC South. And if you can finish strong, obviously it happens. So still a lot of football left to be played, but I do like where the Saints currently are, just because of the fact that they don't need much outside help to take care of the NFC South.
Sean Fazan, WVUE TV, Fox 8. Sean, hey, bud, appreciate it as always. And you can catch Sean and me pregame Saints-Jets on their weekly Saints pregame show. So, Sean, we'll see you then, and thanks for jumping on the show.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. That's Sean Fazan, WVUE TV, Fox 8. And look, I'm with him in that the Saints, I feel like they should be the favorite to win the NFC South at this rate, and yet it's almost like they've had to win so many games in a row just to get themselves to this position, and you would think there would be margin forever, and there's still none for them.
Right, and look, I think we talked about on the program yesterday, Nick Foles is a solid backup. I mean, this is a guy that a few years ago went 8-2 as a starter for the Eagles, and they've got a much better team around him now. They can now game plan to his strengths. I still think they're in the driver's seat in the NFC.
If Nick Foles wins the Super Bowl, should I make some grand proclamation? What are
you going to do?
My hair's going to be gone because the Saints only have to win one more game this year.
It's going to happen, by the way. The shaving is going to happen next week. I mean, the Saints I think they opened as 17-point favorites against the Jets. It's down to 15.5.
Bryce Petty is not going to save my hair.
I don't think I've ever heard of a 17-point line in the NFL. It's very rare.
That is very rare. So, don't forget, Will Brinson, CBSSports.com, covers the NFL. We will join us around 11:30, but we will have some time to take your phone calls if you want to get involved. 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved here on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app on a Torture Tuesday. Right up Jeff's alley, this song here on Dunc and Holder.
Sing along, Jeffrey.
Let me bite the head off a bat, please.
And the New Orleans Saints, what can you say?
Rob Zombie, baby.
2 till 4.
There's something.
So here's one thing we could talk about maybe. I was just looking at the value blocks.
Adding up. I've seen 7 and 9 teams for the last 3 years.
Not a good year for tight ends.
Is not
the highest graded one's like a third round.
Sports 1280.
They still need a defensive end.
$20 per month, unlimited in-car Wi-Fi from AT&T.
Let me see that. I'll look over there. I think there's a bunch of defensive ends.
They need that.
I mean, wide receivers only one first round for sure.
Music, TV shows, music, and more.
Defensive end. Oh yeah, that guy. He's going to go like in the top 5.
Radio app. Go to att.com/connected-car to learn more. Turn your car into a
powerful Wi-Fi hotspot. And that guy's like an outside. That guy's like a Vic Beasley kind of guy.
Right. Is that the guy from Boston College?
Yeah, he's really good. Yeah. I don't know who this dude is. Evans from Alabama.
Service and coverage not available everywhere. Other charges.
No, Rashawn Evans. Yeah. He's like a linebacker. He's like a
This is water.
Deion Jones.
Can you feel this, Helen? Yes, water. Helen, it's water.
Deaf and blind, Helen Keller overcame her world of darkness. Foresight, pass it on.
DJ Chark is like the second highest rated receiver.
Hi, this is Jennifer Coolidge.
Well, I
the
guess
American Heart
those can't
Association
be
says
not
the
including
disco
the
song
juniors.
"Staying
Well,
Alive"
that's 'cause
is the near perfect
he's a
beat for
second round
hands-on
grade.
Ooh,
music.
should they just take Arden Key?
You
Is he
see
going
a
to drop
teen or
that low?
adult
Where
collapse
is he
from
at?
cardiac
wouldn't
arrest.
be- he's not
You
on
only
that.
need
Probably
2
not on it 'cause
steps
he's
to help
not a
save a
senior,
life.
right?
Call 911 and push hard and
Let me
fast
see.
in the center of the chest to the beat of the song
I
"Staying
can look him up
Alive."
separately. They always
Disco is
project
back
them
and it's
separately.
saving lives. To learn more, go to heart.org/hands-only-CPR.
Nationally supported by the WellPoint Foundation.
There's no word on what Apple is going to do with Shazam. Tech giant recently bought the app that lets users identify songs, movies, TV shows, and
First-round
commercials
pick
from short
projection.
audio clips.
First
Apple
out of
could use
144
Shazam's technology to
defensive
spruce up
ends.
Apple Music, or they could just shut it down.
So I guess
as Shazam refers users
he'll
to
probably
Apple
come out.
Spotify up to the tune of 1 million clicks per day. TechCrunch says Apple is also interested in Shazam's augmented reality and visual recognition technology. Amazon will now wake you up
What
with your
about
favorite song, as
spicy hot
Alexa
take
owners
for you
can
here?
use their device like a traditional radio
Lamar
alarm
Jackson
clock.
as
You
the
can
Saints
request alarms
receiver.
like
Oh,
pop music
no.
running at 5 a.m. or
Why
request
not?
to be woken up
Terrell
to music
Pryor did it.
genres, specific
Yeah, he's a
songs or
bum.
your favorite
Hines
artist,
Ward.
Or you could just ask
was he a quarterback in college?
I think it was, yeah. So was, what's the guy's name? The hyphenated guy for the
classified
Redskins.
site now
Antoine
allows sellers to
Randall.
accept cryptocurrency
Quarterback at
as
Indiana.
payment, and buyers can restrict their
Come on,
search
those guys are
only
all
to
great.
sellers who will accept digital currency. Tech Report.
I think Hines Ward was a quarterback.
NBC News
Pretty sure he
Radio.
This is
be
Dunc and
wrong.
Holder on Sports
Yeah, he's got a picture of him
1280
throwing a
New
ball.
Orleans.
Jeff promoting his Louisville guys to come to the Saints potentially.
During the break, we were just talking about the need for a wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. So bear with me on this. It's not a great year, talking about next year, for wide receiver prospects. Now, it'll all develop. We'll have some juniors come out, and the draft pool will get much deeper in about a month or so when these players start declaring. But right now, there's only, on the NFL Draft Scout, there's only one surefire first-round draft pick grade for wide receivers. And again, we're really early in the process, and that is Oklahoma State receiver Washington. Let me get his first name. I don't know his first name. And DJ Chark is actually a second or third rounder. So my proposition is Lamar Jackson.
So you don't think he could play quarterback in the NFL? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm thinking he could, but I think he would be an incredible receiver if he can catch. That's the one thing.
If he can catch.
He's just an incredible athlete with the ball, and you talk about somebody who could get deep and somebody that could run after the catch. James Washington's the receiver I'm talking about.
I've seen him play watching Oklahoma State a few times this year, and he's very good.
Yeah, he's first-round grade, number one wide receiver prospect. A lot of people think Lamar Jackson's going to move to receiver, and as we were talking about, lots of guys have done it in the NFL. The latest being what's the quarterback from Ohio State?
You mean Braxton Miller or Terrell Pryor or both?
Oh, well, both. Both those guys did it. Antoine Randall did it. Hines Ward did it. I think Lamar Jackson could play quarterback, but I think he could be, look, just get him on your team, figure out what to do with him. A guy like Sean Payton with a talent like Lamar Jackson would be unbelievable.
I still think, and we had Sean Fazan on just in the segment before, and we got just talking about potential draft because, hey, it's Tuesday. We've got a long week of Saints talk we'll get into, so why not just do a little draft talk Tuesday here? But I think that defensive end still has to be a priority. I don't think you're going to go out and spend mega bucks on a defensive end in the free agent market because the dollar amounts if a defensive end actually hits free agency, the prices shoot through the roof and you're paying too much. Obviously, you can look at it now. The Giants paid too much for Olivier Vernon. I mean, come on. He had a good year. He had a good year. What, last year? This year? No. And you're spending, I don't even know how much money, obscene amounts of money. So
what about Arden Key with the Saints?
Would the Saints have to trade up to go? A, the Saints don't draft LSU players, so that would never happen. And then B, they would have to trade up to go draft an LSU player. You think they're going to do that? Never. They would never do that ever.
That would be incredible. They would certainly make for a good draft day.
They'd blow the roof off of the old theory that's been floated around.
Conspiracy theory.
Conspiracy theory.
They don't want LSU players.
Well, Al Woods didn't help.
It didn't help this past week when Deion Jones made that pick to win the game either.
No, not so much.
That didn't help their cause.
No, it did not. But, yeah, I would still say an edge rusher would be a premium because you don't know what you're going to get back with Alex Okafor. He was never going to be really the long-term answer. Right. Anyway, if he had a good season, then you hurt. Yeah, but he got hurt. So now it's very uncertain what his future is going to be in New Orleans, and he's going to have to rehab back and coming off of probably his best year overall. I mean, if he would have kept playing, the Saints would be in pretty good shape along that defensive front. Now they're having to play patchwork. Look, Trey Hendrickson's going to be out for a few weeks. Now what do? You're in bad shape there. I mean, your Okafor's gone. Hendrickson's going to be – you can't play him every down. What do?
You got to rotate in Muhammad at some point.
He's going to have to play at some point.
Look, I'm 100% in agreement with you about an edge rusher. I thought they should have drafted an edge rusher last year. It worked out for them. But if you go first round, get a pressure player off the perimeter, you can pick up – the Saints have proven they can get a receiver in the mid-rounds that can be productive. They're very good at that. And it's not a great year for tight ends. You can get a tight end in the third round. So they can go mid-rounds to address their offensive weaponry needs.
2 minutes.
But pass rushers, those guys usually don't last. I mean, they're usually taken in the first round or upper second, and you got to invest in those guys.
All you got to do is look at just draft history as far as we're talking specifically wide receiver and tight end for Saints. Jimmy Graham was a third-round pick. Michael Thomas was a second-round pick. Obviously, both good draft picks for the Saints. And they have a history of developing offensive weapons easier than they do defensive weapons, even though, you look at it this year, and Marshawn Lattimore is a first-round pick. Von Bell is a second-round pick. Sheldon Rankins, first-round pick. So you're having to go high as far as you're hoping these defensive players are going to develop, and you got to take them higher. In other drafts, you can take their skill position guys later and develop them and be all right. I mean, we've seen that historically from the Saints.
I want to talk in the second hour, get in a little discussion with you, get your thoughts on, is this now just a three-man race for the Rookie of the Year between, I think Kamara's injury actually has kind of made him a little more vulnerable now for the Offensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, the numbers Fournette is putting up, he's getting ready to go over 1,000 yards. And if they keep surging and somehow end up as the number one seed in the AFC, which is possible for the Jaguars, I think he's a real threat to steal that thing.
All right, we'll discuss that. We'll take your phone calls. 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved. Don't forget, around 11:30, we'll talk NFL action as well with Will Brinson of CBSSports.com. And I've got also, Jeff, the updated percentages of where the Saints might be playing, who they might be playing in the playoffs. You know how much I love
those. You love that stuff.
I'm such a geek about that. So we'll talk about that in hour number 2 as well. Sports 1280 NOLA.com and the iHeartRadio app. We're Dunc and Holder.
Excuse us.
If you love this song, then you have good taste in music. And if you love the crisp and refreshing flavor of Pepsi Zero Sugar, then you have good taste in taste. Pepsi Zero Sugar. If you don't love it, you haven't tasted it. Pepsi Zero Sugar. Max Pepsi taste. Zero in on refreshment this holiday season with the great taste of Pepsi Zero Sugar.
Never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never. In nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense.
Winston Churchill's immortal words stirred an entire country in the face of certain defeat. Today, these words give each of us the courage to reach for our own victories.
Never give in. Never give in. Never, never, never.
Commitment. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
WODT WNOE FM HD2 New Orleans. Listen on the free iHeartRadio app. Search Sports 1280. Fox Sports trending now.
Four-time Pro Bowler Devin Hester officially retired from the NFL this morning. In his first 6 years with the Bears, he returned 12 punts for touchdowns. The Steelers placed linebacker Ryan Shazier on injured reserve after spinal surgery. Redskins safety Sua Cravens, who had a concussion, has finally received medical clearance and plans to play next season, according to his agent. Last night at Miami, the Dolphins beat New England 27-20. Jay Cutler with 3 touchdown passes, 2 to Jarvis Landry. And the Patriots now 10-3, and they play at 11-2 Pittsburgh this Sunday. That could decide the top seed in the AFC. The Dolphins are 6-7, 1 game out of the final playoff spot. Miami plays at 7-6 Buffalo this Sunday, and then hosts Buffalo in the final game of the season at the end of the month. Last night in the NBA, the Rockets won their 10th straight game. Golden State won its 7th in a row. I'm Steve DeSager.
4.5 minutes.
For the elimination of accessible cords on window blinds because they keep killing children. Dr. Gary Smith is the senior author of the study, which looked at kids under 6 years old during a 25-year period ending in 2015.
There were 271 deaths, or roughly a death every month, and those are primarily from strangulation on the window blind cords.
Dr. Smith is the director of the Center for Injury Prevention at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. He says 17,000 children were injured during that same time frame, and that's 2 a day. New standards will go into effect next year, but Dr. Smith says they're not strong enough to completely eliminate the risk posed by window blind cords. He says all window blind products should be made cordless. His study is published in the medical journal Pediatrics. Health Update, Sarah Lee Kessler, NBC News Radio.
All right, I'll just write my column today. I mean, I will.
It's time for some straight talk. You have their unlimited plan.
Because of that.
So why do you keep running out of high-speed data?
No access to anyone.
Never run out again with Straight Talk's new Ultimate Unlimited plan. Get all the 4G LTE you want, all high-speed, and all for just $55 a month on America's largest, most dependable 4G LTE network. Only from Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart.
What's wrong?
Video typically streams at DVD quality. Please refer always to the latest terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com.
If you love this song, then you have good taste in music.
Yeah.
If you love the crisp and refreshing flavor of Pepsi Zero Sugar, then you have good taste in taste.
It's a 2-horse race.
Pepsi Zero Sugar. If you don't love it, you haven't tasted it.
I don't know.
Pepsi Zero Sugar. Max Pepsi taste. Zero in on refreshment this holiday season with the great taste of Pepsi Zero Sugar.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey there.
What's up, bruh?
Hello.
Aloha.
You got
a
couple minutes.
Hey. Hola.
Hi.
It takes a lot of voices to create the sound of us. The Y welcomes all of them with open arms. From career readiness to safe spaces, the Y is there, no matter who we are. Now, more than ever, they need your support. Donate to your local Y today. The Y, for a better us.
Read by members of the Y.
How much money did you make this year? A 6-year-old named Ryan made $11 million. And all he did was play with toys while his parents made videos of him, reviewing those toys. Ryan is host of Ryan's Toy Review and a YouTube sensation.
Welcome to Ryan's Toy Review. Hi, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Ryan has 10 million subscribers, and he generated about $1 million a month pre-tax and advertising revenue this year, making him number 8 on Forbes magazine's annual list of the highest-earning YouTube celebrities. Your internet experience could change in a big way after this week's FCC vote to end net neutrality rules, which prohibit internet service providers from blocking or slowing websites. They'll now be able to charge extra for streaming video or social media or direct you to a business other than the one you...
1 minute.
As Washington Post tech reporter Brian Fung.
All of these, again, are very speculative, hypothetical examples, but, you know, in theory they would be...
We got a mic in Slidell, y'all.
Okay. Supporters of the proposal, including industry lobbying group U.S. Telecom, promise consumer fears are unfounded.
Consumers care that their content isn't blocked, their content isn't throttled. Those principles existed before the current rules, and they're going to exist after.
But FCC Commissioner Jessica Rosenworcel, who is voting against the proposal, disagrees.
We know they have the technical ability to do so. We also know they have the business incentive to do so. And now the FCC is giving them the legal green light to go ahead and explore those kind of relationships.
NBC's Jolynn Kent reporting. And Apple is buying the music recognition app Shazam, a reported $400 million deal. Shazam was valued at $1 billion just 2 years ago, but revenue of only $54 million last year was way below expectations. Analysts say, though, it will be a big help to Apple Music and could be integrated with Siri. In a statement, Apple says the two are a natural fit, sharing a passion for music discovery, consumer and business news. Joe McConnell, NBC News Radio.
All right.
Ridiculous. Say, no, I don't think there is anything. No, just not.
Dunc and Holder, hour number 2 on a Tuesday, December 12th. Talking a lot of Pelicans, talking a lot of Saints. We're going to extend our Saints conversation into hour number 2. Jeff's got an interesting topic, and I'm curious to where he's going to go with this. I'm curious because Jeff wants to talk about the Rookie of the Year race, of course, offensive Rookie of the Year race. I still think even the defensive Rookie of the Year race is still pretty open. I know Marshawn Lattimore would seemingly be the favorite, at least from what we've seen, despite he doesn't have these wild numbers. But look, he had an interception against the Falcons as well, and it's almost like the legend of Marshawn Lattimore because he takes away the entire field, and you can't quantify that, but obviously a big impact. But we'll talk about the offensive Rookie of the Year race, and Jeff has an interesting debate. So, I'm curious to see where we go with this. But first, 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved. I know Mike and Slidell just hopped on. So, Mike, thanks for calling Dunc and Holder. What's up, Mike?
I think this year, looking at the Saints, they've beaten the teams they're supposed to beat, so I don't think they'll have a problem winning the last 3. And I think they might even get the second seed, because I think, what if Philadelphia loses 2 games out of 3 and the Rams lose to Seattle, which is possible? And I also want to talk about the draft, how we kind of, everything's been going our way. Lattimore kind of fell in our lap. We wanted Patrick Mahomes, and we wanted Reuben Foster, a great middle linebacker, but with the offensive line injuries this year, we kind of got lucky to get Ramczyk, and the Jets were going to get Kamara, and he kind of fell into our lap. So what do you guys think about that? Things have kind of been going our way.
Hey, Mike, appreciate the phone call. Look, I would agree. The draft certainly fell in their direction. The Saints were fortunate to get Lattimore because he did fall, because if he wasn't there, then you would have had a real massive debate about Patrick Mahomes in that draft room.
Gosh, could you imagine if that would happen? If they would end up with Mahomes instead? Just think of the fortunes.
Mahomes instead of Marshawn Lattimore. If Marshawn Lattimore went 10th and they wouldn't have had him, it would have been a different type of season.
This has been my point all along about taking a quarterback. I think they need to take the successor, find the successor, but I don't think they need to invest a first-round pick in it. Not at this point where they have so many other needs. This team was not built yet. They needed Lattimore. Patrick Mahomes is going to sit for 2 or 3 years behind Breeze, or they're going to move on from Breeze, and they're going to be in a transition mode. So that would have been disastrous if they'd used the number 11 pick. They would, you know what they would be like without Marshawn Lattimore? They'd be the 2016 defense right now.
Yes.
They'd be getting lit up. So that would have been a huge error in judgment. Now I realize it's easy to say find Drew Brees' heir apparent. I mean that's what everybody's looking for. But and maybe it's Mahomes, maybe it's not, or maybe these quarterbacks, there's one in the 3rd round that will pan out. But right now, I think they're fine taking that guy later in the draft and developing him.
Maybe it's Miles Brennan.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you heard it here.
I think the heir apparent, I'm going to throw out a hot take for you. The heir apparent's going to be Arch Manning III, which is Cooper's son, who's tearing it up at Newman in the middle school level and is the next Manning.
So Drew, it's going to take a while. So Drew's going to play till he's 47?
Yes.
Essentially, is that what you're saying?
Then the Saints take Arch Manning III, and he's the hometown hero and carries the torch for another 15 years, and they go from Breeze to Manning. What an incredible story that'll be. Just let that marinate a little bit.
Why don't they just go to Eli after this year?
because Eli's going to be in Denver following the Peyton Manning plan.
Or Jacksonville.
No, Bortles is playing well. Everybody's down to my boy Blake Bortles. He's playing a lot better.
You could have him as your boy.
He's playing well. Look at his numbers. His numbers the last 4 or 5 weeks have been really good. And speaking of Jacksonville, let's get into that. So I'm doing my research, kind of doing a story this week about Leonard Fournette, and start looking at his numbers. They're pretty spectacular numbers, considering I think he missed at least one game this year. He's got 923 yards rushing. He's 7th in the league. I think he's 3rd in touchdowns with 8 rushing touchdowns. He's got 5 100-yard games. Listen to this stat. This is an incredible stat. With 500-yard rushing games, he's got the 3rd most of any running back in the last 3 years through 11 games, or through 13 games, I should say, except Edgerrin James had 7 at the same point, and Adrian Peterson had 6 as a rookie. So only 2 other backs ever have had 5 100-yard rushing games in their first 13 games in the last 30 years, I should say. That's pretty salty stuff, and I think if they continue to surge the way they are, and they have a shot, Larry, to unseat both Pittsburgh and New England for the number 1 seed because they beat Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh, and the fact that New England and Pittsburgh play each other this week. So they could kind of go in the back door here and get a top seed, and if they keep winning and Fournette puts up more 100-yard games, I think he's a real threat to win the Rookie of the Year.
And you look at New England, they lost to Miami last night.
I know. Miami, who was god-awful when we saw them.
Inexplicably losing. Basically, Tom Brady looked like Jay Cutler, and Jay Cutler looked like Tom Brady. It was a role reversal.
At one point, weren't they 0 for 9 on 3rd down?
I think they were 0 for 11 or something wild.
I've never seen anything like that. And Miami's offense is so bad. Now, I will say this. Kenyon Drake is a player that I can see why they traded Jay Ajayi now. This kid's going to be a star. I wish I'd have picked him up in my fantasy league.
Hashtag nobody cares about your fantasy
I'm sorry
league.
about that. But he's a good player. And somebody, I think Field Yates tweeted out today. Did you see that tweet about what the depth chart was at running back at one time? It was Kenyon Drake, T.J. Yeldon, Derrick Henry, and
Alvin
Kamara. Unbelievable.
That's why Alvin Kamara had to leave to go find playtime somewhere else. But yeah, let's go back to, you're looking at Leonard Fournette, and you would have thought that his name and his lasting power, because everyone I feel like in America knows Leonard Fournette as far as in the NFL and what he did in college, but he's taken a back seat to Alvin Kamara in the Rookie of the Year race, and you know how much I love my odds.
You do love your odds. Do you have some odds?
I do not have any updated odds yet. Maybe I could find some in the break. But the last few weeks, Alvin Kamara has become the runaway favorite for the Rookie of the Year race. And you do mention his numbers and how he's got 923 yards, but he's only averaging 4.0 yards a carry. He's running to 8-man fronts left and right. He's even gone on Twitter and told fantasy idiots to stop tweeting at him about the fantasy stats because he's running into 11-man fronts all the time. But you look at 923 yards, 4 yards a carry, and I almost discounted Kareem Hunt, but if you look at his numbers...
I know, you're counting him out in his numbers, but their team is tailed off.
His numbers, he's got 1,046 yards. He's averaging 4.8 yards a carry. He started off so hot, and he's kind of tailed off, and I think that's part of it. And we know Leonard Fournette...
Kareem Hunt's second in the league in rushing.
Right.
I mean, you can't discount that.
No, you can't.
They've got to win, though. They won the other day. They've got to get back in the hunt, or else I think it's a two-man race.
But you look at Alvin Kamara, and he has surged. As the Saints have surged, he has surged, and he's a more dynamic player than both of these teams. And I think that is what kind of gets people starstruck because he can do it all. Like, these guys aren't as elusive as St. Alvin Kamara. They're not the ones breaking off and making people miss tackles left and right. And now the NFL landscape is learning what Alvin Kamara is, and he is one of the more elusive players in the league.
But it's all about timing. And Kamara's surge has happened toward the latter part of the year. If you remember, Fournette early in the year, he had a 75-yard touchdown run and he had a 90-yard touchdown run against the Steelers, I think it was. So he's had these incredibly big plays, but he's tailed off lately. Now, he came back with a big play this week. I mean, a big game this week. He ran for 101 yards against the Seahawks, and that's a big-time performance against a good defense. And I think if he keeps it up, I think he's got a real shot.
No doubt about that. Why don't we take a break right here on the show, and when we get back, I'm going to go look up some odds because, you know, I gotta know the truth. What does Vegas think about this?
I want to hear, because I think I did see something that came into my email inbox the other day, how the odds changed in the NFC and overall about Super Bowl chances and NFC chances because of the Wentz injury.
Yes.
So I'd like to see that. That would be interesting.
All right, we'll look up that, and then again, we got a little bit more time for your phone calls. 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved. Also, don't forget in about 15 minutes, Will Brinson covers the NFL for CBSSports.com. We will have him on here as well. So come on back. Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. Dunc and Holder. Yeah, I got the at least on the Super Bowl, all that stuff.
Yeah, so the other day,
even on the playoffs, the MVP race.
What's better than that
let's go through all
you
that.
got at the office Christmas
so the other day,
you know, the one that's been passed around for 5 years running.
You know, I see Thornton on the field, and I'm like,
Sucks
hey,
to be
man,
you, doesn't it? Winning Pelicans tickets. That's what the Sports 1280 All-Stars have your chance to win. Weekdays, all you have to do is listen for the winning keyword, Sports 1280, slam dunking your holiday, and catch all the games on News Talk 99.5, WRNO.
It should sell for double the price of $2,999.
52 diamonds, plus a half-carat center stone.
Inside a double halo.
With diamonds going down both sides of the ring. We call it the Wow Ring.
Ramsey's Diamond Jewelers on Veterans at I-10 in Metairie and on the West Bank in
Now
Manhattan.
they want to bring in.
Howdy, folks. Colonel Sanders.
Right. 2 minutes.
Holiday message from KFC.
Right.
This year, don't waste your holiday vacation cooking dinner. Instead, waste it watching TV or catching up on sleep. And let me prepare a home-style meal for the family with a KFC $20 fill-up. That's 8 pieces of delicious original recipe chicken, 2 large mashed potatoes and gravy, a large coleslaw, and 4 biscuits. Just $20. All right, get along now. That TV isn't going to watch itself. KFC, it's finger-licking good. Available for a limited time only. Pricing and participation may vary. Tax extra.
Now that the holiday countdown has begun, count on CVS Pharmacy for all those last-minute little things you'll need to make the season feel special. You can find all of your holiday favorites in one place, like festive light sets, seasonal candles, and garland for the Christmas tree, all 25% off. And M&M's and Hershey's Kisses to fill the candy dish for your guests, now 2 for $6. So hurry into your neighborhood CVS Pharmacy and save big on the little things you need this holiday. Restrictions apply. See circular for details.
There's no word on what Apple is going to do with Shazam. Tech giant recently bought the app that lets users identify songs, movies, TV shows, and commercials from short audio clips. Apple could use Shazam's technology to spruce up Apple Music, or they could just shut it down, as Shazam refers users to rival Spotify up to the tune of 1 million clicks per day. TechCrunch says Apple is also interested in Shazam's augmented reality and visual recognition technology. Amazon will now wake you up with your favorite song, as Alexa owners can use their device like
30 seconds.
Alarm clock. You can request alarms like pop music running at 5 a.m. or request to be woken up to music genres, specific songs, or by your favorite artist. Or you could just ask Alexa to simply wake you up at a given time to music. Craigslist is joining the Bitcoin craze. The popular classified site now allows sellers to accept cryptocurrency as payment, and buyers can restrict their search only to sellers who will accept digital currency. Tech Report, Larry Olson, NBC News.
Saturday.
You gotta keep them separated.
This is Dunc and Holder on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
You figured the Carson Wentz injury would change up maybe the perception of who's the favorite in the NFC, who's the favorite to win the Super Bowl, who's the favorite to win the MVP. Carson Wentz is going to be out of that race now, even though if they judge by, 13 games, he probably had an MVP-type season, but people aren't going to do that anymore because he's not going to finish the season. But as far as where the Eagles slot now and where the Saints, how does that affect the Saints? Bovada, the odds maker site that I lean on every week, all the time, my entire life, even when I'm sleeping, even though I don't bet real money on anything. Still, I use it, and Jeff teases me, but now he wants to talk about it. So here you go, Jeff.
I'm intrigued.
There you go. So, okay, as far as Super Bowl odds right now, The Patriots are the favorites, followed by Pittsburgh, Minnesota, and the Eagles have dropped to 4th. They were 3rd last week, so they dropped 1 spot to 4th. And the Saints are 5th in Super Bowl odds. So New England is 9-4, Pittsburgh is 4-1, Minnesota is 8-1, Philadelphia went from 6-1, is now 9-1. The Saints went from 10-1 last week to 14-1 now.
So the Saints are the 3rd favorite among NFC.
In the NFC, yes. The Rams have actually fallen. Well, the Rams were below them last week, but the Rams, their odds dropped even lower. They were 12-1 last week. Now they're 16-1. But yeah, you're seeing the Packers' odds jump. You're seeing Jacksonville's odds jump. But yeah, the Eagles dropped 1 spot as far as in the Super Bowl is concerned. They are the 2nd team, and they're also listed as the 2nd team to win the NFC now. Last week they were the favorites. Now the favorites are the Vikings. Eagles are now 2nd. The Rams and Saints are tied for 3rd as far as winning the NFC title at 7-1. So it hasn't changed them that much. And I think, Jeff, part of it is teams assume, odds makers probably assume that the Eagles are still a pretty good football team. And even though Nick Foles wasn't the same Nick Foles as he was a couple of years ago, that they could still keep this thing going, and they still are in the driver's seat to be the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, I think the team that, well, actually, what I was going to say, the potential that maybe Saints fans should root for is not necessarily an individual team, but they might want to root for a 3-way tie. And the reason for that is the tiebreaker procedure is different when you get multiple teams involved instead of just 2. And because the Vikings and Rams have beaten the Saints head-to-head, that eliminates them right off the bat in any tie with either of those exclusively. But if they get in a 3-way tie, it goes, I think, to conference record. And the Saints have a very good conference record. They're 7-3 right now. Say they win out, they would end up 9-3. And that might allow them to somehow get a higher seeding if all hell broke loose at the top of the NFC and some of these teams came back to them and they ended up in a 3-way tie. The only reason I say that is because Minnesota, to me, looks like they're going to get one of those 2 top seeds. I just don't see them falling apart. Their most dangerous game, I think they play at Green Bay, and I think Aaron Rodgers will be back for that game, so they could very easily lose that game, but that would just give them the same record as the Saints if the Saints win out. I don't think they're going to lose their other 2 games. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think both Minnesota games, other than that Green Bay game, are against very winnable opponents. And Minnesota, having lost now, dropped a game, I think they're going to be pretty salty the rest of the way.
Yeah, and I don't think Philadelphia's schedule's all that tough going the rest of the way either.
It's very easy.
And so you're hoping for Nick Foles to not be the Nick Foles that I've been wanting to say this. Nick Foles, remember, was the quarterback when the Saints went to Philadelphia and the Saints beat Philadelphia in Philadelphia.
Right, but that was not as good an Eagles team as this team.
I would agree.
And all the way around. Now, here's what I was alluding to earlier. The Vikings played this week against the Bengals, who are done. Let's face it, they're done, in Minnesota. Then they go to Green Bay, which could be dicey if Aaron Rodgers is playing, and Green Bay is still in it. That's the other thing that's a caveat. I think Green Bay plays at Carolina this week.
And Aaron Rodgers is going to try to play, it sounds like.
Now, if they win, they're going to have momentum, and they're going to be in it. If they lose, they're pretty much out of it, and they may not have the motivation. So all these things factor in. And then the last game the Vikings play is at home against Chicago. I can't see them losing in Minnesota to Cincinnati or Chicago.
No.
I just don't see it happening.
Or at least 2-1.
Right.
And that would put you with a tie with the Saints. And so you're sunk.
You're screwed.
Right.
Can I say that? I guess I can say that.
You just did.
And then the Eagles are playing the Giants this week. Total disarray. And then they're at home against the Raiders and the Cowboys in Philly. So I think the worst they're going to do is 2-1. I don't see them losing 2 of those games. So I think the top 2 seeds are locked up. I really do. I'll be shocked if one of those two teams ahead of the Saints loses 2 games, which is what basically has to happen.
And I know a lot of the topic yesterday in the locker room, the Saints had locker room access, so we had, our reporters had a chance to catch up with some of the players. And a lot of the talk was, watching the playoff standings. If I'm the Saints, it's okay to acknowledge, okay, yes, I've looked at the standings, I know what's what, but they just need to concentrate on winning, because none of these other teams are having to deal with divisional foes bearing down on them.
Right.
The Saints are in the most unique situation because of the Panthers, because of the Falcons, and they know it. They have to win and win every week. And then you worry about your game, and then when, say, you beat the Jets, all right, you get in the locker room, all right, let me just see what happened. But if you keep winning, just out of curiosity, because if you win and you win out, you're good as far as in your division, and then you just get in the playoffs and figure out what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I think the strategy should be just win the division, win out, go 12-4, and let the chips fall where they may outside of your own fate, because there's just too many convoluted scenarios that could happen. And this team, Larry, we talked about this yesterday, and I think you would agree 100%. This team, I think, is better equipped to go on the road and win a playoff game than most of the Peyton-era teams have been, because of the running game, the offensive line, and the defense, at least when it was fortified earlier this year. But the fact that you've got Case Keenum and Nick Foles now, which is who you'd probably be playing on the road, neither one of those guys is going to light up your pass defense. The teams I worry about playing the Saints are ones that have like Matt Ryan or Aaron Rodgers, really elite quarterbacks, because right now I think they're still vulnerable in the secondary. But those other situations, Nick Foles and Case Keenum, you'll take your chances in a playoff game against Drew Brees.
If Green Bay gets in, look out. I would not want to face them.
No one's going to want to face those guys, because it's almost like they have second life. But, man, it's going to be tough for them to get in. They got to beat Carolina on the road, then beat Minnesota. And Minnesota's been a very good road team. I don't know. And they're already so far back.
They've got to – it can happen. It could happen.
You have to give Mike McCarthy a lot of credit and that team a lot of credit for not bailing. I mean, it looked bad when we were up there. Well, when we were up there in October, I guess.
Yes.
October. Boy, they looked really kind of defeated after losing Rodgers, and they were still going through the transition to Brett Hundley. He was struggling, but they found a formula for him, and they're letting him use his legs and running the ball and kind of controlling the clock, and they're winning now.
I'll just put it to you this way, and this is from MakeNFLPlayoffs.com. I use these stats basically every week in my 1st and 10 column. You look at it right now, and the Saints, they have an 86.8% chance of making the playoffs. The Rams, 82.5%. The Panthers, 75.9%. The Falcons, 65.8%. And the Seahawks, 47.7%. So that's, 3 through 7 I'm talking about as far as chances of making the playoffs. The Packers have a 14.9% chance. So they are, because look, Atlanta's 8-5, Seattle's 8-5, Green Bay 7-6. So you've got to leapfrog a couple of teams just to get through there.
Yeah, who does Atlanta play this week? Are they playing Tampa? I think they're playing Tampa.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Because that game, Christmas Eve, as if the Saints are going to need more
motivation. Yes, they play Tampa. Yes.
And Tampa just seems to me like they're...
Monday night.
Oh, really?
Football, Falcons at Tampa. Falcons are a 6-point favorite right now.
I don't know about that game. I think Atlanta wins that game, but then I never would have thought New England would lose to Miami. Sometimes Monday night, teams rise up. It's amazing. And you know what was interesting? I know there's been a lot said among the conspiracy theorists out there.
There's been some conspiracy theorists out there lately, last couple of days?
People asking about the Saints having to go on the road in their Thursday night history, which is true. I think they played 9 of 11 games on Thursday night on the road. Most of the time, though, the NFL, recognizing the short week, they almost always schedule a very short travel trip. It's almost always Atlanta or Carolina. I think of the 9 road games the Saints have played, I think 7 of them have been.
I feel like we've been to Carolina and Atlanta a lot on a Thursday night.
Right, and one of the Thursday night ones was the opener at Green Bay. Remember, that's a kickoff classic. That doesn't really count because it's not. There's no short week there. So, But what was even more interesting to me, instead of that anomaly, is Monday night. The Saints have played 39 Monday night games in their history. I think 30 of them have been at the Superdome. So, it evens out, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, I know it's not a short week, but the fact is there's these scheduling anomalies that happen, and people are trying to read in some kind of conspiracy when it's not there. It's just that's the way the schedule works out year to year, and you can start looking at these big numbers over time, and it looks like something's going on when it's just a weird scheduling.
Have you heard Mike Cirillo makes the schedule? I've heard that too.
Oh yes. Well, I think Sean Payton tweeted that out. Unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
It is pretty unbelievable. I'll be honest with you. It is pretty unbelievable. Why don't we take a break right here on this show? When we get back, we'll talk with CBSSports.com's Will Brinson, covers the NFL. We'll talk with him about his thoughts on the Saints, the NFC South race, the NFC race, now that Carson Wentz is adios on the sideline. So we'll talk with him, and we'll have time for phone calls a little bit in our final segment. So if you want to jump in our conversation, go ahead. 504-260-1280 is the number to get involved here on Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. We're Dunc and Holder.
Yeah, why not they make a good point in the YouTube chat. Why not
your forecast on Sports 1280 New Orleans?
Keep Trey Edmonds in the backfield. I mean,
this report is brought to you by Dell.
Edmonds.
From the Fox 8 Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Bruce Katz. Today on your Tuesday, a breezy, cooler day as the front moved in. Today's high only in the mid to upper 50s. Now tonight, could see a light freeze or frost on the north shore of 32, 30 down south. And tomorrow Wednesday, still breezy and cool, the high of 59. Gradually warming up to 66 on Thursday. Then another front moves in Friday with highs back to the 50s. From the Fox 8 Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Bruce Katz with your Weather Authority forecast.
Still looking for that perfect gift? Dell has something for everyone on your list. From the best brands of electronics to the hottest laptops with Intel Core processors and the latest gaming PCs.
Well, the fact
and
he was on that
there's free
flight
shipping
home
on
and he's been
everything? Call 800-BUY-DELL. That's 800-BUY-DELL.
Got any music lovers on your holiday list? You can get them the perfect gift in less than a minute. Quello Concerts.
Might be.
With Quello, they can
not as far as his conspiracy, but
there
might have been
documentaries on a smart TV, like a Roku TV, or on the go. Quello's got everything from Elvis to Springsteen, Bowie to Beyonce, Pink Floyd to Who, and so much more. In just 1 minute, you can give the perfect gift they'll use all year long. Go to QELLO.com/gift and give the gift music lovers really want.
Gotta send you this.
We've got a top-of-the-line jewelry cleaning machine we're going to give you.
When you buy a pair of diamond stud earrings for Christmas.
Even the 200...
All right, we got Brinson in 22 seconds, 21 seconds, 20 seconds, 19.
Need your input, Dave, on this.
I'm not listening.
This email I'm sending you.
Don't you just love...
And Larry. We got haircut ideas for Larry from a fan.
And sparkling...
Oh, I like it.
I'm personally leaning toward the Friar Tuck one. Oh, my God. These are unbelievable.
They did that to what's his name? Tebow.
Yes,
whether
they
you
did do that to
like
Tebow.
wave or like to growl, we're talking your teams. Sports 1280 New Orleans.
Welcome back, Duncan Holder. Larry Holder, Jeff Duncan here with you in our NOLA.com Times-Picayune studios. And pleased to be joined by an old buddy of mine from CBSSports.com. He used to come on the radio with me long ago. I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, maybe a wife and multiple kids since then for at least me. I know Will as well. Will Brinson, CBSSports.com, covers the NFL. Will, it has been a long time, my friend. How you been?
Yeah, what's going on, fellas? Actually, I literally just drove past my old house that we lived at like 4 years ago. I think I don't remember how long it was, Larry, but I mean, it may have been pre-child. I don't know if I had a kid. He turned 4 in January, so it's possible. It's been too long.
Yeah, it has been, but great to get you on the show. And look, just start off the bat, your perception of the Saints. What have you made of this team this year? Look, we've talked to so many people along the national landscape. Obviously, we're surprised at what the Saints have been able to do, but at least on their end, they've had to do this if they wanted to stay in the race, because I know you follow the NFC South closely. I mean, this thing is as tight as we've seen in a number of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Saints, won't go down as the biggest surprise of the 2017 season, largely because of all the different things that have popped up, whether it's the Jaguars chasing the in the playoffs, say that out loud, or unfortunately Carson Wentz and Deshaun Watson, who played so well but both got injured. But I think you could argue that the Saints morphing from a team that had been 7-9 for 3 straight years, relied entirely on Drew Brees with an okay running game and no defense whatsoever, into this power running team that played great defense and created turnovers and mirrored the 2009 Saints. It was one of the bigger surprises of the year. I mean, I didn't see it coming, especially when injuries started to pop up in the early portion of the season or before the season. And, ultimately, I think that when you look at New Orleans, they've scuffled a little bit the last couple of weeks, but when you look at them, they have an offense that, if Alvin Kamara is healthy, he's an incredible player, clearly, this year, and if Mark Ingram's healthy and if that offensive line is healthy, they have an offense that can travel, and that's critical, especially against a lot of good NFC defenses. And the one thing about New Orleans that really stands out to me is that they've only had to win maybe once or twice this year by actually utilizing the Hall of Fame quarterback. So if they can get into a shootout with you. They don't want to do it, but they don't mind doing it, and they just have that extra gear that I think will come in handy come the playoffs.
Will, how do you view the injury to Carson Wentz? We were talking on the program yesterday. I think the Eagles are in a pretty good spot with Nick Foles. I mean, this is a guy that a few years ago went 8-2 as a starter, and I think a lot of people initially said, "Oh, they're done." I don't think that's quite the case, because I think that team's pretty well rounded, and that finishing slate they have is not that difficult. Now, talking about winning the Super Bowl, it might affect them there, but as far as still having enough left to get that number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should finish with the number 1 seed because of the slate. I mean, they go 2-1. That's worst case scenario. Well, not worst case. I mean, they could go 0-3, and then Carson Wentz. We could get think pieces on Carson Wentz, why he should win the MVP and stuff like that. But I would expect that they would go 2-1 because of the way that their team is set up. And when you look at it, I mean, they were winning. They were winning big because of Wentz, and what he was doing on third down this year is just borderline magical. And what he was doing, at the quarterback position as a whole, his mobility in the pocket, his ability to extend plays, his physicality as a runner, and his quick strike throwing, just development as a passer, were incredible. But I think when you look at what the reason they were successful wasn't just Wentz. I mean, this is a team that had a very nice offensive line, that ran the ball effectively with a nice complementary set of running backs, and had perhaps the best defensive line in football. I mean, you go back and look at this depth chart, and it's Fletcher Cox, Timmy Jernigan, Brandon Graham, Vinny Curry, Derek Barnett having a nice rookie season, Chris Long remaining resurgent as he plays for $0 in another impressive year for him. And having that pass rush and that depth at the position as you go into the playoffs, especially if you're able to capture a bye and maybe even home field advantage, puts you in a pretty good position to make a Super Bowl run, regardless of your quarterback, especially when you add in the fact that they have this offensive line and they have, LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi, 2 guys who are physical downhill runners. I mean, you get into these winter months and you make people come to Philly and play, and you can batter defenses and batter offenses. I mean, Nick Foles has a 27-2 season in terms of touchdowns and interceptions. This is a team that can still win playoff games and still make a run. I don't think they're the clear-cut favorite anymore without Wentz.
Will Brinson, CBSSports.com senior NFL writer, joining us right here on Dunc and Holder. You say they're not the clear-cut favorite anymore in the NFC. Do you have a clear-cut favorite in the NFC right now, or do you think this thing is you kind of throw them all in the playoffs and it's going to be wide open no matter the seeding is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping you would ask me that because I don't know the answer. I don't think there is a clear answer, right? You could say, all right, Minnesota's the best team, but they're still starting Case Keenum, and as well as he's played, you've got to trust him to win multiple playoff games to take down a title. And the Panthers just beat him. Now, the caveat to that is that Minnesota was on its 3rd straight road game and playing against a playoff opponent with a really good defense. So you give them a little bit of a pass there. You could say the Saints are the best team, but they just lost to the Falcons, and I get that, Kamara, we're missing a bunch of guys on defense, and lost some guys in the middle of the game. The injuries on that Thursday night game didn't help them. But has an argument to be the best team, but their offense has been really erratic this year. And Cam Newton, for as amazing as he looks at times, he will do some knuckleheaded things too. I don't know if I fully trust the Falcons to call them the best team in the league. And while the Rams might be the most balanced team in terms of what they can do on offense and defense, there's still just a little bit of that mistrust there for them too, given some of the losses they've taken to the upper echelon NFC teams. Look, you get a quarter of Nick Foles and no Carson Wentz, and you can't come away with a W. It's a little bit of a red flag. So I don't know the answer to it. I think all these teams are going to be in a dogfight for seeding, and are going to be in a dogfight for the playoffs. It could set up for some of the most exciting postseason action we've had in a while.
Well, what do you make of that loss last night by the Patriots? Is that a red flag, or is that just a hiccup with some injuries, no Gronk? That kind of stunned me. I mean, we saw we covered that game over in London this year with the Saints and the Dolphins, and the Dolphins just looked awful at that time. I can't believe that they still have enough offense against the way the Patriots defense was playing to win a game like that. I mean, should we be concerned about New England?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Yes, in the sense of that was a terrible performance, and they looked bad in all facets of the game, particularly on defense. I mean, Malcolm Butler was losing to guys that he shouldn't be losing to on the Dolphins' offense, and they're getting ready to play Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Martavis Bryant, who at least are all very dangerous threats to go up top on you, especially Brown. The Patriots couldn't slow down Kenyon Drake, and they're getting ready to play Le'Veon Bell. So maybe a red flag there. The Brady thing, here's the deal. I don't want to be somebody who makes sounds the alarm on Tom Brady and say, he is 40. This could be it. Yeah, Brady could be going off a cliff, because that's dumb. People have been doing that for 10 years, and every time people do it, they end up looking stupid. So I don't really want to go down that road. But having said that, I was talking about this with Pete Prisco and Jason LaCanfora a few minutes ago on our Pick Six podcast at CBS Sports, which people can subscribe to on iTunes. He said, shamelessly, I think that...
Do you know how shameless I am, Will? You know how long you've known me? I would be bent if you did not give a plug. What's the matter? I'd be like, you're feeling ill.
Yeah. I'm not worried about plugging anything on here. I mean, I'm not going to do like that, but with you guys, I feel comfortable doing it. I think that the last 3 weeks, Tom Brady's been on the injury report with an Achilles that has held him out of practice at least one day per week, and if you look at that game last night, I get that they were missing Gronk. I get that Julian Edelman's hadn't been on the team all year. I mean, he wasn't driving the ball accurately down the field, right? And if I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever it is, when you're playing football, playing golf, if you got an Achilles that's bothering you, you're going to lose some power, and it's going to sap some of your athletic ability. And so I don't know. I mean, that's a red flag to me, at least in terms of, we need to watch this moving forward. I think Brady will probably look great against the Steelers. He will probably be vintage, I'm angry and going to kill everything in my path, destructive Tom Brady. But at the same time, if he comes out and he's not hitting the deep ball, and he's avoiding, he was diving early last night. If he's doing all of that, then I think it is a red flag. The Dolphins, to me, just had Cutler came out, and he's that guy's playing golf, just catches fire. He has all the talent in the world, never puts it together, and then occasionally just throws it all together like that. Drake played really well. They said that was their Super Bowl, so I don't read too much into it from that perspective, but I do worry a little bit, at least about Brady, if he's going to keep being on this injury report with that Achilles.
Will Brinson, CBSSports.com, NFL writer, joining us right here on Dunc and Holder. We've talked a little bit, obviously. Let's spin it back for the Saints for one final question. You look at the way this Saints team is structured, and of course the future is always going to be how long is Drew Brees going to last. Do you think that the way that this team is structured, that not having to lean on Drew, how much do you think that potentially extends his career with New Orleans?
I think it extends it a pretty good deal. I mean, Brees, there need to be more. I talk about think pieces. We need more think pieces on why Drew Brees is the underrated guy in all, in this great run of quarterbacking we've had with Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, never won an MVP. Doesn't get enough credit for what he's done on the field in New Orleans, and continually says he's going to play until he's like 40, and everybody's like, that's cool. Tom Brady already did that. It's like Family Guy. It's like that South Park, or that Family Guy did, or South Park did it, or whatever. It's like, Brady already did everything. We're not going to give you credit. Breeze looks like a guy who can play a few more years. And when you talk about the wear and tear of having to throw 600, 700 passes, whatever it is he does on an annual basis, not having to do that this year, limiting his exposure in the pocket, I think it's a huge deal. It means he can keep playing. And when you have this winning season, too, I think it's a lot easier for everything to kind of gel together and say, we got to get Peyton, Sean and Drew, keep them in town, and this thing is going really well. It's not the sort of chatter you've heard the last few years. And so to me, it wouldn't be surprising to see Drew Brees hang around for another several years and continue to play at a high level.
Will Brinson, CBSSports.com, senior NFL writer. You can follow him on Twitter at Will Brinson. Hey, Will, it's been too long. Let's try to catch up some point down the line. I know we'll catch up somewhere along the NFL league meeting, Super Bowl, whatever nonsense.
Maybe see you at an NFC South playoff.
Maybe so. There you go. All right. Hey, Will, appreciate it as always, and good catching up with you, buddy.
Thanks, Will.
See you guys. Have a great day. Take care.
That's Will Brinson.
It was great.
CBSSports.com. Of course.
Yeah, it was good. I mean,
he's my friend. That's why he's great.
Well, I don't know about that. Let's not get carried away. But he had a really good read, I think, on the Saints. I mean, very fair. And I love the fact that he brought up that Drew Brees might be underrated nationally. I totally agree with that. I think he's going to go down history as maybe the greatest player to never win the MVP.
You could be, there's a lot of great players, because look, it's hard to win MVPs if you're a defensive player. He might be the best quarterback never to win the MVP, maybe. But look, it's not like, did Lawrence Taylor ever win the MVP? Did any of these great defensive players?
I think he was the highest rated. He might have won it once.
Maybe Reggie White.
I think he was the last defensive player to win the MVP was Lawrence Taylor.
Maybe that just ruined my entire argument.
Nice argument, Larry.
Terrible. Come on back. One more segment. Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. We're Duncan Holder. We're going to pick the one guy.
I think he did. I think he's the last one. I may be wrong. That could be wrong.
LSU coming back from the dead.
4-6.
You got to give it to Ed
86.
I wasn't too keen on the time.
Did Lawrence Taylor win it?
I'm sold on him now.
Well, then, crap. He was the last defensive player.
Sports 1280.
Because I think we've written that once or so.
Oh, no. No. Player, I say.
You had to bring up Lawrence Taylor. It could have been Reggie White or somebody.
I know. Reggie White could have been even a good one.
AM/FM radio. In fact, TV
so
reaches
funny.
86% of Americans. Radio commercials just like this one will reach 93% of Americans in every single week of 2018.
I know, I was too.
So if you
We were
are
both
reaching
reading.
moms,
We're looking at each other like,
professionals.
Do you want to answer a question?
No. Pretty much everyone. Radio is the way to do
I want to
it.
read
Make a
it.
resolution. Go to iHeartMedia.com and put radio to work for your company in 2018.
Right, I know the building.
Wishing you all a happy and Merry Christmas.
The joy of living is in the giving.
Easy. Just be easy.
So
Yeah.
let's give lots
Of course.
Right.
Since
Don't care about anybody
1947,
with
the
the Bywater
United States
Mariner.
Marine Corps has been helping Santa fill his sleigh.
Easy to stumble
making
over to
happier
Lucy's.
holidays for
I know.
deserving children
Well, I mean, it
right
looks
in
like it's
your community.
really- yeah.
Go to toysfortots.org and
Place
learn
right
how
there.
you
Well, it's Howlin'
can make a
Wolf is right
If you have
across the street.
questions about
It's like
your
Is that what that is? Yeah, the old Howlin' Wolf
Coaching
Group.
Alliance has
Well, no, it's
PCA,
all the
a
same.
national
I mean, the
nonprofit
Howlin' Wolf,
organization
and they got,
offers
like, the
more than
rules.
1,000 free online resources
Well,
to
we can-
inform and inspire youth and
can
high
walk
school
the
coaches,
butcher.
parents, student athletes, and
Oh,
administrators.
yeah.
Visit PCADeadzone.org.
Perfect.
You should see the things we do.
Yeah,
That's good in every way.
Taylor Swift's run atop the
yeah, I
Billboard
see
200
no
album sales chart over after
None.
her
Now they're gonna have
reputation
to figure
tumbled
out
to
where
number
we're gonna
3.
all
The
I just wanna
hold
know,
on
can we
number
keep
1
our
was
little,
loosened by U2's
thing on
Songs
our
of
windshield so we can always
Experience,
park
debuted
here
at number
free?
1, earning the Irish
I'm sure
Rockers
they'll
their
cut it.
8th
Probably gonna go out the
#1
window.
album.
We do have to figure out parking down there, though. It's not exactly.
A number of musicians
we have to figure out
lending
some
their
kind of
support to a
plan.
bullied Tennessee
I'm sure they'll have a parking
video
garage or
of
something.
Keaton Jones' emotional plea to his bullies has gone viral, leading Perry to tweet, "This broke my heart." While
It's easier to take the ferry to get here.
"Baby, just know you're not alone." Others who showed their support include Kevin Jonas, Snoop Dogg, and Enrique Iglesias.
Is it too late now to say sorry?
Justin Bieber vowing to help those affected by the Southern California wildfires in whatever way he can. During a video, the Sorry singer said he was going to meet with people to get going on a solution, including organizing fundraisers or whatever we can do.
What's on the other side of the street? Not that one.
A documentary about Prince's life is coming. The project
I don't
is
know.
by Spotify's global head of creative services, Troy Carter, who serves as an advisor to the late pop singer's estate.
Future St. Lawrence.
The Boss, Metallica, and Guns N' Roses among the highest-paid musicians of the year. Forbes magazine out with the list, saying it was compiled based on pre-tax earnings. Diddy was number one with $130 million, followed by Beyonce, Drake, The Weeknd, and Coldplay. That's entertainment. Jennifer Bolsoni, NBC News Radio.
I'm suggesting.
There we go.
If they put a studio window and keep it the
Dunc and Holder now. Josh Innes next at noon on Sports 1280, New Orleans.
Jeff totally ruined my entire argument. I named the one defensive player that's won an MVP in like the last 30 years.
Of course, last.
He's the last.
86.
How many players before him have won the MVP?
Defensive players?
Yes.
None. He's the only one ever.
So he's the only defensive player to ever win the MVP.
The eight. Oh, actually, I'm wrong. I was looking at the wrong one. So Alan Page in 71. Those are the only two.
So only two players. So I think they are probably, you could argue, defensive players who are better than Breeze to never win the MVP. So I'll just say quarterback. Best quarterback to never win the MVP. Because look at the quarterbacks. They got some quarterbacks like, no disrespect, but look, Drew Brees is better than Steve McNair.
Well, this is what bothered me. Well, no doubt. And this is what bothered me. I say bothered me. Yesterday during the program, I said, well, now that Wentz is hurt, this might open the door for Drew to slip in if they have this really strong finish. And Josh and Herbie, who were guest hosting yesterday, both said, no way, it's going to Tom Brady. I don't think Tom Brady's a shoe-in. And Tom Brady looked, like Will said a little while ago, he did not look good last night. Is it a shoe-in that Tom Brady is the MVP?
He's still the overwhelming favorite.
I know, but why? Why? Because he's Tom Brady and he's on the Patriots?
What are his numbers? I mean,
I would make a point that, what about somebody on the Steelers? The Steelers are, what, 11-2?
Well, they have three guys, according to Bovada's odds. They have three guys in the race still. Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown. Case Keenum was in the race. They took
Case Keenum?
They took him off the board.
I'm apoplectic. If Case Keenum wins the MVP before Drew Brees, I will jump on the NFL needs to be blown up. Roger Goodell needs to be fired bandwagon.
I don't think you're going to have to worry about that. Just saying. He's off the board.
Next week, the marquee game of the year, at least in the AFC, and one of the marquee games in the entire NFL season, is the Patriots-Steelers. And if Ben Roethlisberger outduels Brady or Antonio Brown has another monster game, he had over 200 yards the other night in a huge high-profile game against the Ravens, I think one of those guys could make a run.
There are only 16 people in the race, according to my dosage of odds. Tom Brady is at 1-5.
That's ridiculous.
Russell Wilson is at 15-2. Drew Brees is 20-1. Ben Roethlisberger is 20-1. Antonio Brown is 25-1. Le'Veon Bell is 33-1. Those are your six in the hunt, according to Bovada. So
I'm looking some stuff up here.
I see that. You're looking up Tom Brady's numbers. I know where you're going with
it.
So
Brady's got a 105 rating. That's pretty strong. He's got 27 TDs, 6 interceptions. Carson Wentz had 33 TDs and 7 interceptions, had a 101 rating. That's pretty strong. But let me see here. Where's Big Ben at? Big Ben's got 24 TDs, 13 interceptions. That's not going to cut it. He's out.
Oh, he had the one game where he threw 5 picks.
What about Russell Wilson? He's having a good year.
He's number 2 on the list as far as MVP. Number 2.
Jared Goff? He's not going to win the MVP.
Come on.
This is a popularity contest. This is ridiculous.
Let's be frank about this, too. How many MVPs has Peyton Manning won? I mean,
5.
Do you think he
the most
deserved
in NFL history?
every one of them, or do you think maybe he won one year because he was Peyton Manning? I mean, if Tom Brady wins it, I think
you're not going to win it
because you're Tom Brady.
You're not winning it when you're having a bad year. I mean, you got to have a good year.
But there might be people who had better years one year than Peyton and didn't win it, and probably Brett Favre, probably the same way, because didn't Brett Favre win 3 MVPs, something to that effect? So, yes, it is a popularity contest at times, but you're not winning it if you're having a bad year. I mean, that's and honestly, if we're going to argue here, you look at Drew Brees, and if you try to compare his numbers to, say, Russell Wilson and Tom Brady, I don't think this year you can compare them. Like Drew Brees in other years, 2011 should have been the MVP. Who won it that year? I forget.
I don't know. I'll look it up.
You got the stats right in front of you. Come on.
I got a computer here.
That's the whole point.
2011, Aaron Rodgers had that.
They went 15-1.
That was the year he had the greatest year in quarterbacking history. So
Drew Brees picked a bad year to be totally incredibly awesome, and his team goes 13-3. Yeah, exactly.
I just don't look. I have great respect for Tom Brady and the Patriots. I just don't think he's had such a great year that you just automatically make him 1-5. I don't agree with that at all. I think the Steelers, the year they're having, what I saw from Ben Roethlisberger the other night, 500 yards, leading his team back against a very good defense. That Ravens defense has 3 shutouts this year already.
Now, I will say this. These odds are from before last night's game, so he might be closer to the pack.
Got to.
Yes.
He had a terrible game last night.
Yeah, he looked terrible.
I mean, he looked, like Will said, you start to look at him and you're like, wow, he doesn't look that good. But we've done that before. He's right. And they'll probably go out and light up the Steelers and beat them by 3 touchdowns. As soon as you jump off the Patriots bandwagon, it comes back to haunt you. They are like the thing that wouldn't die. What was that? Was that a movie? The thing that wouldn't leave? That was the old Saturday Night Live skit, Before Your Time.
The old cockroach in a nuke, basically.
Michael Myers. They're Michael Myers lying on his back with blood coming out of his mouth, and then he rises up. That's the Patriots. They don't die.
So they're Mike Myers bleeding from the mouth.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
That was them against the Falcons. That was them against the Seahawks in the Super Bowl.
Well, that's definitely true.
I mean, you realize that both those Super Bowls easily could have been won by the other team. I mean, probably should have been won by the other team.
They probably both should have been won by A, the Falcons, and B, the Seahawks. Yes.
Yes. So what would the narrative have changed on the Patriots? If they would have lost those Super Bowls, then we're talking about a long drought for them winning them. And people are saying, well.
You know who we'd be talking about him like? We would be talking about him like the way people talk about LeBron James in the NBA, because he gets there, but didn't win the majority of the times he went.
Gets outdueled by Eli, gets outdueled by Russell Wilson. You're exactly right.
By Matt Ryan.
Right.
That would be the narrative, and it wouldn't be, you know who would be the best quarterback in NFL history if that wouldn't have happened? It'd be Joe Montana. That's what they'd be saying.
Well, I think Peyton Manning is going to be the guy. He's the all-time passing leader. He's won more MVPs than anybody else.
Drew passes him up on some of this stuff.
Well, he's going to pass him next year.
Yeah, exactly. So Drew Brees, we could talk. The fact that I'm just going to put it
the fact that Case Keenum is getting any kind of to win the MVP, my whole day's ruined. I got to go home and take a nap.
I thought I was going to end the show, and the fact that we can still and always talk about Drew Brees in these terms just kind of lends the point that New Orleans got one of the best, made one of the best decisions in free agency ever. B, got one of the best players in the NFL history. And C, that's why we're still talking about them 9-4, and he's turns 39 in less than a month.
I concur.
There you go. So I want to thank Will Brinson of CBSSports.com. I want to thank Sean Fazan. Great show. If you missed any of it, sports1280.com, NOLA.com, iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube page. And we'll be back here tomorrow at our NOLA.com Times Picayune studio. So come on back. Sports 1280, NOLA.com, and the iHeartRadio app. Dunc and Older. Oh, yeah, Marilyn Manson and the show. Yeah.
Marilyn Manson.
Marilyn Manson.
Yeah. I'm scared.
You like it. Case Keenum loves Marilyn Manson.
Inviting in the occult.
Case Keenum.
It's like a Ouija board. It's like a Ouija board. All of a sudden, we're going to be possessed like The Exorcist.
Cool, Dan. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Dave. Talk you later.
Yep.
Every month, and those are primarily from strangulation on the window-blind cords.
Dr. Smith is the director of the Center for Injury Prevention at Nationwide Children's Hospital.